The sun was already beating down by 8:15 a.m. when Elijah Carter parked his car across the street from the construction site. A dozen workers were scattered around the foundation, most wearing neon vests and hard hats, heads bent in their morning routine. Elijah stepped out of his vehicle, adjusted the cuff of his button-up shirt, and reached for the rolled-up blueprints on the passenger seat. He didn't look like a guy in charge. No clipboard, no tool belt, just a clean white shirt, dark slacks, and a soft leather bag slung across his shoulder. He walked through the temporary gate and nodded toward the man nearest him. "Morning." The guy gave a short nod but didn't say much. Elijah glanced around, scanning the structure's framing, noting a discrepancy near the northwest corner. Something about the angle looked off. He was halfway across the gravel lot when a sharp voice called out from his left. "Hey, you can't be here." A tall white man in a faded baseball cap and a shirt with the site's logo was storming over, his walk brisk, aggressive. Elijah paused. "I'm here to check." "Check what?" "This area's restricted. You can't just walk in here." "Who are you even with?" "Elijah Carter." "Don't care." The man cut him off. "We've had stuff go missing before. You're not one of my crew. You need to leave now." Elijah stared at him, calm. He didn't flinch or raise his voice, just stood there, blueprints still in hand. "Look," the foreman said, now standing just feet away. "I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is a private job site. You need to get back in your car and go. Before I call someone." Elijah looked at the framing again, not yet answering. His voice, when it came, was quiet. "There's a mistake in that wall. 10 degrees off." The foreman narrowed his eyes. "What did you just say?" "That corner. It's angled wrong. That means the hallway won't align with the elevator shaft." The foreman blinked. He turned his head toward the structure, then back at Elijah. "You're a contractor or something?" "No." "Then you've got no business here." And then, someone else's voice broke in from behind them. "Elijah!" The foreman turned. A woman in business casual was walking toward them, brisk but composed. "Elijah," she repeated, warmer this time. "Sorry I'm late." Elijah nodded. "No problem." The foreman stepped back, his mouth tightening. "You know him?" She gave a short laugh. "Know him? He's the lead architect on the project. Nothing happens here without his say-so." The foreman looked like he'd been hit in the chest. Elijah didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just turned back toward the structure and pointed again. "That corner. It needs fixing." The foreman's face reddened beneath his cap. He scratched his chin, suddenly unsure of what to do with his hands. "I didn't know," he muttered, not quite meeting Elijah's eyes. Elijah glanced at him but said nothing. The woman beside him, Kendra, the project manager, sighed and looked between them. "Rick, this is exactly why we had the team meeting about vetting visitors professionally." Rick gave a stiff nod. He wasn't wearing a badge. "He's not required to," Kendra said. Her tone wasn't angry, but it was flat, controlled. Elijah stepped closer to the structure. His shoes crunched on the gravel. He didn't hurry. He traced the air with his finger, measuring the slope of the framing. Rick followed, maybe hoping to defend the work. "We followed the specs," Rick said. "Measurements were double-checked." "They were wrong," Elijah said. Not accusatory, just stating it. Rick's mouth opened, closed. "You can get a laser level if you want," Elijah added. "But you'll see I'm right." He crouched slightly and pointed. "That beam off by just under a foot. By the time it stretches 30 feet down the line. You won't notice now, but when the mechanicals go in, you will." Kendra had pulled out her tablet. She was checking something. "He's right. These were updated in version 3B of the plans. That wall should have been adjusted 2 weeks ago." Rick didn't speak. His eyes stayed low. Elijah stood and looked at him again. Not angry, just waiting. "I'll get the crew to tear it down and redo it," Rick said finally. His voice was quieter than before. "Good," Kendra replied. A few workers nearby were watching now. Not openly, just small, sideways glances. A couple had seen what happened earlier. Rick knew it too. His posture had changed. The swagger was gone. "Anything else?" Kendra asked Elijah. He checked his notes. "No, not yet. I'll walk the perimeter, then head back. But we need to talk about drainage on the south side." "Got it. I'll meet you in the trailer in 10. Elijah turned, walked back toward the edge of the lot. Rick didn't move, just stood there, one hand on his hip, the other hanging useless by his side. He'd never asked who Elijah was. He decided instead. Inside the site trailer, the air was cool but tense. Kendra sat at the small table flipping through the printed schematics while Elijah stood near the window watching workers ripple out across the lot. He wasn't angry. Not exactly. Just tired. Kendra glanced up. I didn't know you were stopping by today. I didn't tell anyone. She nodded slowly, understanding. You were checking the site. Unfiltered. Elijah turned from the window. I needed to see how it actually runs when no one's watching. Kendra closed the folder. I'm guessing you got your answer. Part of it. There was a silence. The kind that came when words weren't quite enough. Outside, Rick barked something at a worker, but his voice didn't carry like it used to. You handled it well, Kendra said finally. I shouldn't have to. I know. Another pause. Then Elijah walked to the plans spread out on the desk. Drainage on the south end. If we don't address the slope, that basement's going to take water after the first serious storm. I'll call and survey again. Thanks. He tapped the paper once more, then leaned back. How long has Rick been running crews here? Kendra hesitated. 7 years. Knows construction like the back of his hand. Knows people a little less. Elijah gave a small nod. He's not a bad guy, she added. But he's not good at seeing past what's in front of him. Elijah looked at her, not cold but unflinching. You don't have to be a bad person to cause damage. Kendra didn't respond to that. She didn't need to. Outside, the wind picked up, blowing a sheet of dust across the lot. Elijah watched it pass, slow and steady. He didn't look like the man in charge. But he was. And the dust was starting to settle. By midday, word had spread. It wasn't loud, no one shouted, no one pointed, but the shift in atmosphere was clear. The new guy with the blueprints? The one Rick tried to toss out? He was the architect. The one whose name was printed on every permit, every drawing taped to the site walls. Some of the younger workers kept sneaking glances. Others nodded slightly when they passed Elijah near the foundation. Not out of flattery. More like correction. Rick, meanwhile, kept to the other end of the site. He gave instructions, but with less fire. When he passed Elijah, he muttered something under his breath that might have been sorry, though it was too quiet to confirm. Elijah didn't acknowledge it. He wasn't looking for an apology. Near the southeast corner, 2 electricians were reviewing conduit plans. Elijah crouched beside them. You running this along the column? He asked, pointing. They both turned, surprised. One of them nodded. Yeah, that's what we were told. Elijah took the copy of the plan from his bag, unfolded it. The revised run moves it 6 feet north. Gets it out of the expansion joint. Otherwise, you're looking at potential cracking down the line. The older electrician leaned in. Didn't see that change. Version 3B, Elijah said. Updated last month. Both men stared at the plans, then back at Elijah. You're the designer? One asked, not quite sure how to phrase it. I drew the building you're standing in. There was a beat? Appreciate you catching that, the older one said, nodding. Could have been a nightmare. Elijah smiled faintly. It's what I'm here for. He stood, dusted his palms, and moved on. The 2 workers exchanged a look. No smirks. No jokes. Just respect. Not for what he said. For how he carried it. The lunch bell rang at 12:30. Some guys grabbed sandwiches from coolers, others wandered to the food truck parked just outside the fence. Elijah stayed by the trailer, sketching a quick note in his notebook marking the error near the duct supports on level 2. Kendra brought him a bottle of water. You eat yet? Not hungry. She hesitated before sitting on the steps beside him. You're quiet. I usually am. Kendra looked down at the gravel. I don't think Rick's going to say anything. Not directly. I don't need him to. She nodded. Still, I talked to him. Made it clear it wasn't okay. Elijah glanced at her. What did he say? That he didn't know who you were. That he was just trying to protect the site. Elijah turned the bottle in his hand slowly. People only protect things from what they've already decided is a threat. Kendra didn't argue. She just nodded again. A group of workers passed nearby, laughing about something unrelated. One of them, a younger man with a streak of dust across his cheek, caught Elijah's eye and gave him a slight nod. Elijah returned it. I don't like attention, he said after a while. I've noticed. But I'm not going to shrink to avoid it either. I wouldn't ask you to. They sat in silence for a bit. The hum of generators, the clang of metal. Just enough noise to keep them from saying more. When Elijah stood, he capped his pen and tucked the notebook into his bag. Back to work. Elijah nodded once. Still some things worth fixing. By early afternoon, the mistake in the framing had been torn down. Rick stood nearby, arms crossed, supervising without saying much. The crew worked efficiently, but their energy had changed, less casual, more focused. Elijah walked the site again, clipboard now in hand. Not to assert anything. Just to work. At the northwest corner, he stopped a pair of framers about to remeasure. Double-check against the revised line, he said, tapping the edge of the clipboard. Use the laser. Don't eyeball it. One of them, tall, mid-30s, short goatee, gave a half-smile. You've been here 10 minutes and already fixing what we built. Starting to feel like school again. Elijah didn't smile back. Then get it right this time. The man's smile faded. Not offended, just reminded. He nodded and turned back to work. As Elijah walked on, Rick approached, finally breaking the silence. It's not usually like this, Rick said. Elijah kept walking. Like what? This vibe. Tension. The guys aren't sure how to read you. They don't have to read me, Elijah replied. Just follow the plans. Rick fell into step beside him, quieter now. Look, I've been here a long time. Seen all kinds come and go. Elijah stopped and turned to him. Have you seen someone like me? Rick hesitated. That's what I thought, Elijah said, not bitter, just honest. So maybe instead of explaining, you listen. Rick didn't respond. Not right away. He looked down at his boots, then back at the corrected wall frame being lifted into place. Plans are solid, he said, as if it were an apology. They should be, Elijah said. I wrote them. Then he turned and walked away, clipboard tucked under his arm, the line between authority and assumption freshly drawn. The rest of the day moved with a strange mix of rhythm and restraint. Orders were followed more precisely. Conversations were shorter. Elijah noticed it all, not just what was said, but what wasn't. At one point, a delivery truck pulled up with steel beams. The driver, an older man in a faded cap, hopped down and looked around. Where's your site supervisor? He asked, scanning the crowd. Elijah walked over. You can unload over there, Westpad. The driver looked him up and down. You the foreman? No, Elijah said simply. The driver waited for more, then shrugged. All right, long as someone signs. I'll sign it. The driver handed over the clipboard, not quite hiding the doubt on his face. Elijah scribbled his name and company ID. The man blinked. Wait, you're the... Elijah handed the board back. I'm the architect. Oh, the driver said. It wasn't a question, just a recalibration. He looked over his shoulder toward the construction site, then back at Elijah. Didn't expect that. I know, Elijah said. The driver looked like he wanted to say something else. Maybe explain. Maybe joke it off. Instead, he just nodded once, got back in the truck, and started the lift. Across the lot, Rick had seen the interaction. He didn't say anything either. Just watched. Because sometimes the lesson wasn't in the confrontation. It was in the silence after. By 4:15 p.m., the shadow of the crane stretched long across the gravel. Workers began packing up, wiping sweat from their faces, coiling cables, and securing tools. The site always changed in that final hour, louder again, looser, the day's tension softening under the promise of going home. Elijah stayed near the trailer, going over his notes. Kendra stepped out, phone to her ear, then lowered it as she approached. You sticking around much longer? Just finishing up, Elijah said without looking up. She hesitated. Rick asked if he should come in for a review meeting next week. Elijah didn't answer immediately. He flipped to a blank page and wrote one word. Culture. Then he looked up. He should. Kendra nodded. You planning to keep him on? I'm planning to keep people who learn. She tucked her phone away, thoughtful. You think he will? I think people learn quickest when the cost of ignorance is finally visible. A breeze passed, lifting dust at the edge of the site. Elijah glanced toward a pair of workers walking to their cars. One of them turned and gave a short wave. Elijah returned it without fanfare. Kendra crossed her arms. You really don't like making speeches, do you? I don't need to. She gave a small smile. They're starting to see you. Not because I spoke, Elijah said. Because I stayed. He closed the notebook and slipped it into his bag. Sometimes that's the louder thing. The next morning came early. Elijah arrived just past 7 a.m. The site was quieter than usual, no shouts, no radio. Just a low hum of preparation. He walked the perimeter alone. The wall that had been off yesterday was now straight, braced and level. The mistake was gone, but the memory of how it happened wasn't. He made his way toward the site trailer and found Rick already inside, hunched over some paperwork. He looked up when Elijah entered. No swagger, just a tight nod. Morning, Rick said. Elijah set his bag down and took the seat across from him. Let's talk. Rick shifted in his chair. About yesterday? About what happens next. Rick waited. You know construction, Elijah said. You know how to run a site. Rick nodded slowly. But if the crew mirrors leadership and leadership can't see past appearances, then the mistakes won't just be in the walls. Rick didn't argue. His hands were clasped tight in front of him. You assumed I didn't belong, Elijah continued. Not because of what I said. Not because of what I did. Just because of how I looked when I walked in. Rick looked away, jaw tight. You made a call. A fast one. I've seen it before. I've lived it before. But here's the difference, you know now. And what you do with that matters. Rick finally met his eyes. I got it wrong. Yes, Elijah said. But I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to build something that doesn't fall apart. Rick exhaled slowly. You want me to stay on? I want you to lead better. The crew listens to you. That's a responsibility, not a right. Rick gave a short nod, almost to himself. Understood. Elijah stood and reached for his bag. Good. We've got a building to finish. Rick didn't smile. He just nodded again, this time with more weight behind it. And that was enough for now. By noon, the rhythm on site had changed again. But this time, it wasn't tension. It was precision. The corrected framing passed inspection. The electricians ran conduit along the revised route Elijah had pointed out. And the HVAC crew, now aware the architect might appear at any time, checked measurements twice before touching ductwork. Elijah didn't hover. He wasn't watching for mistakes. He was just present, a steady reminder of the standard. At one point, he stopped to check the stairwell alignment. As he scribbled a quick calculation, he noticed a younger worker nearby, mid-20s maybe, hesitating with a stack of steel studs. You need something? Elijah asked. The guy looked nervous, but stepped forward. You're Mr. Carter, right? Elijah's fine. The worker shifted his weight. Sorry, just yesterday I didn't know. I thought you were someone else. Elijah looked at him. Someone who didn't belong? The young man nodded slowly. Didn't mean anything by it. Just made assumptions. We all do, Elijah said. The question is what you do after. The guy nodded, more earnest now. I'm trying to learn. That's the work, Elijah said. Same as the rest of this place. The worker smiled, a little sheepishly, and turned back to the task. Elijah watched him go, then looked at the studs in his own hand. Straight lines, no shortcuts. The building was starting to take shape again. But more importantly, so was the team. That afternoon, Kendra called a site-wide meeting. Just 15 minutes, standing in the gravel near the main trailer. Hard hats on, clipboards tucked under arms, dust still clinging to boots. Elijah stood off to the side, quiet, observing. Kendra spoke clearly. We've had some missteps this week. Some of them in the walls, some of them in how we treat people. Both matter. The crew was silent. A few eyes drifted to Elijah. He didn't move. I want to be clear, Kendra continued. This site is not just about speed and steel. It's about trust. That includes how we treat the clients, the crew, and yes, the architect. She didn't name Rick. Didn't have to. Everyone knew. From now on, if someone walks onto the site, regardless of how they're dressed, what they look like, or whether you recognize them, you treat them with respect. Period. A few heads nodded. One worker gave a soft, yes, ma'am. Kendra turned toward Elijah. Anything you want to add? He looked at the group. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just this, he said. Buildings are about structure. So are teams. If you cut corners in how you treat people, the whole thing falls apart eventually. He let it hang. Then, quietly, let's keep building. No applause. Just stillness. And then motion. People turning back to work. But their posture had changed. They weren't just following orders now. They were paying attention. Later that week, a site visitor arrived, a woman from the city's permitting office. Clipboard in hand, official vest, businesslike tone. She asked for the site manager. Rick stepped forward. Before, he might have taken over the conversation, waved her toward whatever she needed, kept things surface level. But this time, he glanced back and gestured. Elijah, he called out, you want to walk this with us? Elijah looked up from his notes. There was a pause, not of reluctance, but of recognition. He stepped over, nodding to the inspector. This is Mr. Carter, Rick said. Architect of record. Nothing happens here without him signing off. The inspector raised her brows slightly, then extended her hand. Good to meet you. Elijah shook it. Likewise. The three of them walked the perimeter together. Rick let Elijah speak first on every point. The inspector took notes. And something about the way Rick walked beside him, not ahead, not behind, made it clear something had shifted. Not everything. Not overnight. But enough. As they passed the reframed wall, Rick slowed a little. We won't miss it again, he said, low enough for only Elijah to hear. Elijah didn't answer right away. Just looked at the wall, then ahead. Good, he said finally. Then they kept walking. No tension. No spectacle. Just progress. The building began rising faster after that. Steel beams, concrete slabs, stairwells framed in clean lines. But something else was being built too, less visible, harder to measure. The team was changing. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Just enough. Small things. Workers started checking updated drawings more carefully. Questions were asked instead of assumptions. Even jokes, the quiet, respectful kind, were shared between crew and architect. One afternoon, while walking the second floor, Elijah passed two workers discussing an install. One turned to him mid-sentence. Hey Carter, he called casually. You want eyes on this before we lock it in? Elijah stepped over, crouched beside the line marked in chalk. Let's see. It wasn't just that they were including him. It was how they said it, like he belonged there. Like it was normal. Later, back on the ground, Elijah stood by the trailer sipping coffee. Rick approached, slower than usual. No clipboard. Just hands in pockets. You ever think about how fast people judge what they see? Rick asked. Elijah looked at him. Every day. Rick nodded, his eyes scanning the rising floors above. I did. That first morning. I judged. I know. Rick exhaled. Didn't think I had anything to learn. Turns out I had a lot. Elijah didn't respond with praise or forgiveness. Just a simple statement. We all do. And that was the truth of it. It wasn't about blame anymore. It was about what came next. The day the signage went up, the crew gathered around the front entrance. It wasn't a ceremony, just a quiet moment after hours when tools were down and the light hit the steel frame just right. The lettering was simple, modern, sharp against the concrete. Carter Medical Pavilion. Someone whistled low. Another muttered, didn't know it was named after him. A younger worker leaned toward a colleague. He designed the whole thing, right? Yeah, the other replied. Architect. From the ground up. Rick stood near the back of the group, arms crossed, watching Elijah, who stood a few steps away, hands in his pockets, saying nothing. One of the electricians stepped forward. You proud? Elijah gave a faint smile. I'm satisfied. That's more useful. Kendra joined them, arms folded. Feels different now. Whole crew's been on time. Focused. Respect builds momentum, Elijah said. Same way buildings do. Bit by bit. Someone in the group nodded. Another muttered, should have seen how folks acted that first day. Elijah didn't flinch at that. He wasn't there to rewrite the past. He was there to outlast it. A breeze rustled the mesh fencing around the site. The group lingered a moment longer. Not for the sign, for what it represented. Not just a name in steel, but a name they now recognized as earned. Weeks later, as the final inspections wrapped and the crew prepared to hand over the building, Elijah returned for one last walkthrough. No fanfare, no speeches, just quiet steps through finished hallways, white walls, polished floors, skylights spilling clean light across new surfaces. He paused near the lobby, where sunlight hit the main wall just right. The space was still, untouched by patients or staff. For now, it belonged only to possibility. Rick approached from behind, holding a clipboard but not looking at it. We're cleared, he said. Final approvals came through this morning. Elijah nodded. Good. Rick hesitated. I'm glad you stayed on the first day. Elijah turned to him. You thought I wouldn't? Rick gave a sheepish shrug. You could have walked, called me out, raised hell. Elijah looked past him toward the entrance doors, where a few workers were laughing as they loaded tools into a van. I didn't stay to prove a point, Elijah said. I stayed because the building deserved to be built right, and so did the people working on it. Rick nodded. He looked like he wanted to say more, but didn't. They stood in silence, watching the last bits of equipment disappear into trucks. The site, once tense and guarded, now felt light. As Elijah turned to go, a small voice stopped him. Mr. Carter? He turned to see a boy, maybe 8, standing with his mother near the glass doors. She wore scrubs, her badge clipped to her collar. Elijah stepped closer. You built this? The boy asked. I designed it, Elijah replied. A whole team built it. The boy looked around, eyes wide. It's big. Elijah smiled gently. It had to be. The mother mouthed a quiet thank you before leading her son inside. Elijah watched them go, then stepped outside into the light. No headlines, no applause, just a finished building, and the knowledge that the foundation, seen and unseen, was stronger now than when he arrived.